I was standing in my backyard in Scottsdale, Arizona, admiring the sunset through my new Brazilian hammock when I heard the sharp click of heels on my driveway and knew my peaceful evening was about to end. The hammock had arrived just 3 days earlier, a gorgeous hand-woven piece I'd ordered from an artisan in Sao Paulo after months of saving up. It was suspended between two mature mesquite trees at the edge of my property, swaying gently in the desert breeze. The fabric was a stunning gradient of blues and purples, and the craftsmanship was incredible. Every knot, every weave was perfect. I'd spent the better part of Saturday afternoon getting the suspension system just right, using tree-friendly straps that wouldn't damage the bark. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Excuse me, sir." I turned to see a woman in her late 40s marching across my lawn, her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit despite the 90-degree heat and carried a leather-bound folder like it was a weapon. I recognized her immediately. Sharon Whitmore, president of the Saguaro Heights Homeowners Association. "Hi, Sharon," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Something I can help you with." She stopped about 10 feet from my hammock, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mr. Vincent, I received a complaint about an unauthorized permanent structure on your property." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "That." She pointed at my hammock with one perfectly manicured finger. "That permanent structure. According to the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions, any permanent structure requires written approval from the Architectural Review Committee before installation." I looked at the hammock, then back at Sharon. "It's a hammock. It's a permanent structure. Sharon, it's literally made of fabric and rope. I can take it down in 30 seconds. She flipped open her folder with a dramatic flourish. Section 7.3. Subsection B of the HOA guidelines states that any structure, fixture, or installation that remains on the property for more than 72 hours and requires anchoring or attachment to existing landscape features is considered permanent and requires prior approval. It's attached with straps, tree-safe straps that I can remove anytime. Has it been installed for more than 72 hours? I hesitated. "Well, yes, but that's a ridiculous interpretation of the rule. A permanent structure would be like a shed or a gazebo." Sharon's smile was cold. "The rules don't specify what type of structure. You have 48 hours to remove it or submit a retroactive application to the Architectural Review Committee. If you fail to comply, you'll receive a fine of $100 per day until the violation is corrected." She turned on her heel and walked away before I could respond, her heels leaving small divots in my lawn. I stood there for a long moment, holding my beer and trying to process what had just happened. My neighbor, Tom Patterson, poked his head over the fence. "Did Sharon just threaten to fine you over your hammock?" "Apparently it's a permanent structure," I said, still somewhat dazed. Tom laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Good luck, man. She got me for $2,000 last year because my mailbox was the wrong shade of tan." Not different color, wrong shade. I walked inside my house, my relaxing evening completely ruined. My golden retriever, Cooper, followed me, sensing my mood. I dropped onto my couch and pulled out my laptop, navigating to the HOA website to actually read the stupid rules. Tom was right to sound so grim. Section 7.3, subsection B was worded exactly as Sharon had quoted it, but there was no way the people who wrote these rules had meant for them to apply to a simple hammock. The section was clearly designed to prevent people from building sheds or other actual structures without approval. I spent the next hour reading through the entire HOA covenant document. It was 78 pages of the most tedious, overreaching nonsense I'd ever encountered. There were rules about what color your curtains could be if they were visible from the street. Rules about when you could water your lawn and for how long. Rules about what types of desert landscaping were acceptable and which weren't. There was even a rule about where you could store your trash cans and what color they could be. The next morning, I called my friend Derek Martinez, who was a real estate attorney in Phoenix. We'd gone to Arizona State University together, and he'd helped me with the legal paperwork when I bought the house 2 years ago. Derek, can an HOA really consider a hammock a permanent structure? He sighed on the other end of the line. Did Sharon Whitmore pay you a visit? You know her. Every real estate attorney in the Phoenix metro area knows Sharon. She's infamous. What exactly did she say? I explained the situation, reading him the exact wording of Section 7.3, subsection B. Okay, Derek said slowly. So technically, based on a strict interpretation of that wording, she's not wrong. But it's an absurd application of the rule. The intent is clearly about actual permanent structures. So what do I do? You have 2 options. 1, take down the hammock and avoid the hassle. 2, submit the retroactive application she mentioned and hope the Architectural Review Committee is more reasonable than Sharon. What are the chances of that? Sharon chairs the Architectural Review Committee. I closed my eyes. Of course she does. There's a third option, Derek continued. You could fight it. Show up to an HOA board meeting and argue your case in front of all the homeowners. But that's going to be time-consuming and stressful, and there's no guarantee you'll win. I thought about it. The hammock had cost me $800. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, and more than that, it was the principle. I'd bought a house, not rented space in Sharon's personal kingdom. I'm going to submit the application, I said, and if they reject it, I'll take it to the board meeting. Derek whistled softly. You sure? Sharon doesn't like being challenged, I'm sure. That afternoon, I filled out the Architectural Review Committee application form. It was 6 pages long and asked for detailed specifications, measurements, photographs from multiple angles, a site plan showing the exact location on my property, and a written justification for why the structure was necessary and how it would enhance the neighborhood aesthetics for a hammock. I spent 3 hours on that application, taking photos with my phone, measuring distances, and writing what I thought was a very reasonable explanation about how the hammock provided a peaceful outdoor relaxation space that was completely in keeping with the desert lifestyle aesthetic that Scottsdale was famous for. I submitted the application through the HOA website portal and waited. 5 days later, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, an actual printed letter on expensive cardstock with the Saguaro Heights HOA letterhead. Dear Mr. Vincent, the Architectural Review Committee has reviewed your retroactive application for the installation of a suspended fabric structure, hammock, on your property at 4472 Desert Vista Drive. After careful consideration, your application has been denied for the following reasons. 1. The structure does not conform to the approved aesthetic guidelines for outdoor installations. 2. The structure was installed without prior approval, demonstrating disregard for established procedures. 3. The structure is visible from the street and neighboring properties, impacting the visual harmony of the community. You are required to remove the structure within 7 days of receipt of this letter. Failure to comply will result in daily fines as previously specified. Sincerely, Sharon Whitmore, Chair, Architectural Review Committee. I read the letter 3 times, my anger building with each rating. The hammock wasn't even visible from the street. My house sat on a corner lot, and the backyard where the hammock hung was completely obscured by a 6-foot block wall and desert landscaping. You couldn't see it from the street unless you walked around to the side gate and peered through the gaps. I called Derek again. They denied it. All 3 reasons they gave are either subjective or factually wrong. Did you take photos proving the hammock isn't visible from the street? I included 12 photos with the application showing sightlines from every possible angle. Then you have grounds to contest it. The next HOA board meeting is in 3 weeks. You'll need to submit a formal request to be added to the agenda at least 10 days before the meeting. I'll do it. Derek paused. Davis, I'm telling you this as a friend. Sharon has made people's lives hell for less than this. She once hired a private investigator to follow a guy who challenged her over a fence height dispute. She's vindictive, and she has way too much time on her hands. Noted. I'm still doing it. I submitted my request to be added to the board meeting agenda that same day. Then I did something that would end up changing everything. I was frustrated and needed to blow off steam, so I posted about the situation on social media. Nothing identifying, just a general rant about HOA overreach. My HOA is trying to fine me because they say my hammock is a permanent structure. Can't even relax in my own backyard without someone measuring compliance. The post got a few sympathetic comments from friends, and I forgot about it. But 2 days later, I received a direct message from someone named Jennifer Caldwell. Hi, I'm a features editor at Outdoor Living magazine. I saw your post about the hammock situation, and I'm actually working on a story about creative outdoor relaxation spaces. Would you be willing to tell me more about your setup? I'd love to feature it in our upcoming issue if it's as nice as you make it sound. I stared at the message. Outdoor Living magazine was a big deal. My mom subscribed to it. It was one of those glossy publications you saw at bookstores and high-end home goods stores. I messaged back, explained the situation in more detail, and sent her a few photos of the hammock. Her response came within an hour. This is gorgeous. The craftsmanship is incredible, and I love how you've integrated it into the desert landscape. We're actually putting together our fall issue right now, and I think this would be perfect for our backyard retreat feature. Would you be open to us sending a photographer to do a proper shoot? We'd want to run this in mid-August. Would I be open to it? It seemed like perfect timing. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for July 28th. If the magazine feature came out before then, it might actually help my case. Absolutely, I wrote back. When would you want to do the shoot? We scheduled it for the following Tuesday. Jennifer warned me that there was no guarantee the feature would run or when it might run, as editorial decisions could change, but she seemed genuinely excited about the hammock. The photographer, a cheerful guy named Marcus Webb, showed up at 7 in the morning to catch the good light. He spent 2 hours taking shots from every conceivable angle, using fancy equipment and reflectors and all sorts of professional gear. He had me sit in the hammock for some of the shots, arranged throw pillows I didn't even own but that he'd brought with him, and generally made my modest backyard look like something from a resort. This is a really special piece, Marcus said as he packed up his gear. Where did you get it? I told him about the artisan in Brazil, a woman named Helena who'd been making hammocks for 30 years. I'd found her through an Instagram account dedicated to traditional crafts. Jennifer's going to love this story, Marcus said. It's got everything. Beautiful craftsmanship, international connection, desert aesthetic. Really good stuff. After he left, I felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe this would all work out. Then Sharon sent another letter. This one informed me that since I hadn't removed the hammock within the required 7 days, I was now being fined $100 per day. The letter was dated 2 days ago, which meant I was already $200 in the hole. I called Derek again, angrier this time. Can she do this? The board meeting hasn't even happened yet. Unfortunately, yes. You were given notice to remove it, you didn't, so the fines kick in. You can dispute them after the fact if the board rules in your favor, but in the meantime, they're technically valid. This is insane. I know. Listen, start documenting everything. Every interaction with Sharon, every letter, every photo showing that your hammock isn't visible from the street. If this goes badly at the board meeting, you might need to consider legal action. Legal action over a hammock. Legal action over HOA overreach and selective enforcement of vague rules. Trust me, judges don't like HOAs that abuse their authority. But it's expensive and time-consuming, so treat it as a last resort. The next 2 weeks crawled by. Every day, I knew another $100 was being added to my fictional fine balance. I kept the hammock up out of sheer stubbornness. Cooper seemed to sense my stress and spent more time than usual lying at my feet in the evenings. Tom came over one evening with a 6-pack of beer and sat with me in the hammock. Well, he sat in one of my patio chairs while I lay in the hammock. You know she's going to make an example of you, Tom said. Let her try. I'm serious, man. When I fought the mailbox thing, she showed up to the board meeting with a PowerPoint presentation. Actual slides showing how my mailbox was destroying property values. She had graphs. Graphs about a mailbox. I wish I was kidding. She'd somehow pulled comparable sales data from the surrounding area and created this whole correlation between homes with non-compliant fixtures and reduced selling prices. It was complete garbage, but it looked official, and the other board members just kind of nodded along. I took a long drink of beer. How many people are on the board? 5. Sharon, obviously. Then there's Robert Chen, he's the vice president, nice guy, usually reasonable. The treasurer is Patricia Donovan, she's pretty much in Sharon's pocket. Secretary is James Morrison, he's new, moved in last year. And the member-at-large is Teresa Young, she's tough to raid. So I need to convince at least 3 of them that Sharon is being ridiculous. Good luck. Sharon's been president for 8 years. She's got that board locked down tight. On July 15th, I received an email from Jennifer at Outdoor Living magazine. The subject line made my heart race. Feature approved, Davis, great news. The editorial team loved your hammock story. We're running it as our cover feature for the September issue. The magazine hit stands on August 20th. But we're publishing a digital preview on our website on August 5th. I've attached a PDF of how the layout will look. Congratulations! I opened the PDF with shaking hands. There, in glossy magazine layout, was my backyard. The photos Marcus had taken looked incredible. The hammock seemed to glow in the golden morning light, the desert landscape around it perfectly framing the scene. The headline read, Paradise Found. One man's Brazilian hammock transforms a desert backyard. The article was beautifully written. Jennifer had woven in the story of Helena, the artisan who made the hammock, talking about traditional weaving techniques and sustainable materials. She'd quoted me talking about the importance of creating peaceful outdoor spaces in our hectic modern lives. She'd even included tips for readers on how to properly hang a hammock without damaging trees. There was a sidebar with the headline, When Good Design Meets Bad Rules. In it, Jennifer briefly mentioned my HOA situation without naming the specific community or anyone involved. She'd framed it as a broader conversation about how homeowner associations sometimes stifle creativity and personal expression in outdoor spaces. I immediately forwarded the PDF to Derek. His response came back in minutes. This is perfect. Bring printed copies to the board meeting. This gives you credibility and shows that your hammock isn't just some random backyard junk. It's an award-winning outdoor feature. An award. I read the article again and realized Jennifer had included a small gold seal graphic at the top of the layout. Outdoor Living Magazine Excellence Award. My hammock had won an award. I printed 20 copies of the PDF on nice paper at a FedEx office, spending $60 to make sure they looked professional. Then, I started preparing what I'd say at the board meeting. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a beige stucco building near the neighborhood entrance that also housed a small gym and a pool. I arrived 15 minutes early, clutching a folder with my printed articles, photos, and a typed statement I'd prepared. The parking lot was fuller than I'd expected. Apparently word had gotten around that there was going to be a showdown over the hammock situation. Tom was there, and so were several other neighbors I recognized from the annual HOA picnics. Inside, chairs were arranged in rows facing a long table where the board members sat. Sharon was in the middle, wearing another pantsuit, this one navy blue. Robert Chen sat to her right, a trim man in his 50s with reading glasses perched on his nose. Patricia Donovan was on Sharon's left, a heavy-set woman who kept glancing at Sharon as if waiting for cues. James Morrison, the new secretary, looked uncomfortable in a polo shirt and khakis. Teresa Young sat at the far end, an older woman with sharp eyes and silver hair cut in a neat bob. Sharon called the meeting to order at exactly 7 o'clock. There were several routine items on the agenda first: budget updates, pool maintenance schedules, a proposal to repaint the entrance sign. Everything was discussed in the most tedious detail possible. Finally, 45 minutes in, Sharon said, "Next item. Request for ruling review from Davis Vincent regarding an unauthorized permanent structure at 4472 Desert Vista Drive." I stood up, my folder in hand. "Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board." Sharon's expression was neutral, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She was ready for a fight. I walked to the front and handed each board member a copy of the Outdoor Living Magazine layout. "What you're looking at," I said, "is a feature from Outdoor Living Magazine. It's going to run as their cover story in September. The subject is my backyard hammock, which the magazine's editorial team selected out of hundreds of submissions because of its exceptional craftsmanship and aesthetic integration with desert landscaping." I saw Robert Chen lean forward, studying the pages with interest. James Morrison was already reading the article text. "The hammock in question," I continued, "is made by a master artisan in Brazil using traditional weaving techniques that are over 100 years old. It's attached to 2 mesquite trees using tree-safe suspension straps that can be removed in less than a minute without any tools. It causes 0 damage to the trees or the property. And contrary to the Architectural Review Committee's claim, it is not visible from the street or any public areas." I pulled out my next set of documents, passing around photos showing sightlines from every street-facing angle. These photos show the view from Desert Vista Drive, from Saguaro Way, and from the community walking path. As you can see, the hammock is completely obscured by my privacy wall and desert landscaping. It has 0 impact on the visual harmony of the community. Patricia Donovan cleared her throat. "But you installed it without approval." "I installed a removable recreational item in my private backyard. I didn't realize that required approval any more than setting up a patio chair or a barbecue grill would require approval. Section 7.3, subsection B is very clear," Sharon said, her voice sharp. "Section 7.3, subsection B," I replied, "was clearly intended to cover actual permanent structures. Sheds, gazebos, pergolas, things that are built and installed permanently. It's an absurd overreach to apply it to a hammock. The rule doesn't specify types of structures, Sharon shot back. Then by your interpretation, every patio chair, every planter box, every garden hose holder in this community is a permanent structure that requires approval. Is that really the standard we want to enforce? There was murmuring from the audience. I saw several people nodding. Robert Chen spoke up. I think Davis makes a fair point. The intent of that section was never to regulate hammocks or similar temporary recreational items. The rule was written to prevent someone from building a shed without the neighbors knowing. Sharon's jaw tightened. The rule is the rule. We can't make exceptions based on personal feelings. It's not about personal feelings, I said. It's about reasonable interpretation and consistent application. Has anyone else in this community been fined for patio furniture, for playground equipment, for any other removable outdoor items? Silence. I'll take that as a no, I continued. So what we have here is selective enforcement of an overly broad rule against a specific homeowner. That's exactly the kind of arbitrary authority that gives HOAs a bad reputation. Teresa Young spoke for the first time, her voice measured. Mr. Vincent, I'm looking at this magazine article. It says your hammock won their Excellence Award. Is that correct? Yes, madam. The magazine gives that award to outdoor features that demonstrate exceptional design and craftsmanship. So we're potentially fining a homeowner for having an award-winning outdoor feature that improves his property and isn't even visible to anyone else. She looked at Sharon. That seems counterproductive. Sharon's face was flushed now. This isn't about awards. This is about following established procedures. Mr. Vincent chose to ignore those procedures. I didn't ignore them, I said firmly. I genuinely didn't believe they applied to a hammock. And when I submitted a retroactive application, as you instructed, it was denied for reasons that aren't supported by facts. The claim that it's visible from public areas is demonstrably false. James Morrison raised his hand tentatively. Can I ask a question? How much are the current fines up to? 13 days at $100 per day, Sharon said. $1,300. There were gasps from the audience. Over a hammock. Someone called out. Sharon banged a gavel I hadn't noticed she had. Order. The audience is here to observe, not participate, but the damage was done. I could see the mood in the room shifting. Even Patricia Donovan looked uncomfortable now. I'm going to make a motion, Robert Chen said. I move that we reverse the Architectural Review Committee's denial and approve Mr. Vincent's hammock as an acceptable outdoor recreational feature. Furthermore, I move that we waive all fines that have been assessed. I second, Teresa Young said immediately. Sharon looked like she'd been slapped. We need discussion before voting. I think we've had plenty of discussion, Robert said. All in favor? Robert, Teresa, and James all raised their hands. Opposed, Sharon and Patricia raised theirs. Motion carries 3-2, Robert announced. Mr. Vincent, your hammock is approved and all fines are waived. The audience broke into applause. I felt a wave of relief so strong my knees actually went weak. Sharon stood abruptly, gathering her papers. This meeting is adjourned. She walked out without looking at anyone. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to congratulate me. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. You actually did it. You beat Sharon. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. Robert Chen approached as the crowd was thinning. Mr. Vincent, I want to apologize. Sharon has been running the Architectural Review Committee with very little oversight, and clearly some of her interpretations have been overly strict. The board is going to review all of Section 7 and provide clearer guidelines about what actually requires approval. "I appreciate that," I said. "And congratulations on the magazine feature. That's genuinely impressive." Over the next week, things settled down. The hammock stayed up, and I received an official letter from the HOA secretary confirming that my outdoor installation was approved and no fines were owed. The digital preview of the Outdoor Living magazine article went live on August 5th, as scheduled. Jennifer had added a small update at the end noting that, after initially objecting to the hammock, the homeowner association reversed course and approved it. The article got shared widely on social media. Friends from all over the country sent me links and congratulations. My mom called, thrilled that her son was in her favorite magazine, but the story wasn't quite over. On August 12th, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Davis Vincent?" "Yes." "This is Detective Lisa Ramirez with the Scottsdale Police Department. I'm calling about Sharon Whitmore. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" "She's fine, physically. But she's under investigation for embezzlement from your homeowner association. Your name came up in our inquiries, and I was hoping you could answer some questions." I sat down heavily on my couch. "Embezzlement?" The HOA treasurer, Patricia Donovan, filed a report last week. Apparently, after your board meeting, some of the other board members decided to do an audit of the association's finances. They found significant discrepancies. Money that should have been in the reserve account wasn't there. We're still piecing together the details, but it looks like Miss Whitmore has been using HOA funds for personal expenses. "How much money are we talking about?" Preliminary estimate is around $70,000 over the past 3 years. I felt sick. "What do you need from me?" "We're interviewing all homeowners who have had significant interactions with Miss Whitmore. We're trying to establish a pattern of behavior. Can you tell me about your experience with the hammock situation?" I walked Detective Ramirez through the whole thing, from Sharon's first visit to the board meeting. She asked detailed questions about the fines, the application process, and Sharon's general demeanor. "Did she ever ask you for payment directly, or was everything processed through the HOA system?" "Everything was official letters. I never paid anything because the fines were waived." "Understood. Have you had any other interactions with Miss Whitmore or the HOA?" "Not really. I've only lived here 2 years. I went to a few community events, but I mostly kept to myself." "Okay. Thank you for your time, Mr. Vincent. We may need to contact you again as the investigation continues." After she hung up, I sat there trying to process it. Sharon's obsessive enforcement of petty rules suddenly made more sense. She'd been creating a climate of fear and control to keep people from asking too many questions about anything, including the finances. Tom came over that evening after I texted him about the detective's call. "Holy crap," he said, dropping onto my couch. "Sharon was stealing from the HOA." "Apparently. How did I not see this? I've been on the landscaping committee for 2 years. I see her all the time. Because she was good at misdirection. Everyone was so worried about mailbox colors and hammock regulations that nobody thought to look at where the money was actually going." Tom shook his head. "You know what's crazy? My mailbox fine. I paid $2,000. Where did that money go? Probably into Sharon's pocket." The investigation moved quickly. By the end of August, Sharon had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly reporters were calling me asking about the hammock situation. I gave one interview to a local television station, keeping it brief and factual. I explained how Sharon's aggressive enforcement had seemed excessive, and how her defeat at the board meeting had apparently triggered the audit that uncovered the embezzlement. The September issue of Outdoor Living magazine hit newsstands on August 20th. I bought 5 copies. My parents drove down from Flagstaff to see the hammock in person and take photos with their son, the magazine cover star. The hammock itself became a minor local attraction. Neighbors I'd never met stopped by to see it and congratulate me. A few people from other parts of Scottsdale actually tracked down my address and knocked on my door asking for advice on their own HOA disputes. I became an accidental spokesperson for HOA reform. A local homeowners' rights advocacy group invited me to speak at one of their meetings. I wasn't really qualified or particularly interested in becoming an activist, but I understood their frustration. Sharon's trial was set for January of the following year, but in October, she accepted a plea deal. She pled guilty to embezzlement and agreed to repay the full amount stolen plus damages. She received a sentence of 3 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 18 months. Patricia Donovan resigned from the board in shame, saying she should have caught the discrepancies earlier. Robert Chen became the new HOA president, and one of his first acts was to completely rewrite Section 7 of the covenants to clearly define what actually constituted a permanent structure requiring approval. The new rule was sensible. Anything that required concrete footings, permanent attachment to the house, or electrical installation needed approval. Removable outdoor furniture, recreational equipment, and temporary decorative items did not. By December, life had returned to normal. The hammock swayed gently in my backyard, exactly where it belonged. I'd started a tradition of having coffee in it every Sunday morning, watching the sun rise over the McDowell Mountains. Derek came over one Saturday in mid-December with a bottle of good whiskey and 2 glasses. "I'm billing you for all the free legal advice," he joked, pouring us each a generous measure. "Put it on my tab." We sat in my backyard, the December air cool and comfortable. Cooper lay between us, content. "You know, when you first called me about this, I thought you were being stubborn," Derek said. "I figured you should just take down the hammock and avoid the hassle. And now I think you did everyone in Saguaro Heights a favor. If you'd backed down, Sharon would still be president. She'd still be stealing money and making people miserable over stupid rules. You standing up to her triggered the chain of events that brought her down. I was just defending my hammock." "Yeah, well, sometimes that's all it takes. One person saying enough is enough." We clinked glasses and drank. Christmas came and went. I strung lights in the mesquite trees around the hammock, and the effect was magical. I threw a small party on New Year's Eve, inviting Tom and a few other neighbors. We stood around my backyard fire pit, counting down to midnight, and I realized I was genuinely happy here now. The community felt different without Sharon's oppressive presence. People seemed more relaxed, more willing to actually talk to each other instead of worrying about getting reported for some minor violation. In January, Outdoor Living magazine contacted me again. They wanted to do a follow-up piece about the whole saga and how the hammock had become a symbol of homeowner rights. I politely declined. I'd had enough attention, but I did agree to one last interview with Jennifer off the record, just to close the loop on the story. "You regret any of it?" She asked over coffee at a cafe in downtown Scottsdale. I thought about it. "No. I wish Sharon had just let it go from the beginning. I wish she hadn't been stealing from her neighbors, but I don't regret standing up for myself." "Your hammock changed a lot of lives," Jennifer said with a smile. "It's a good hammock." By February, Sharon's house went up for sale. She'd been released on bail pending her surrender date to begin her prison sentence, but she'd apparently moved in with family somewhere out of state. I never saw her again. Robert Chen proved to be an excellent HOA president. He was reasonable, transparent, and actually seemed to care about making the community a nice place to live rather than a perfectly controlled showcase. The board meetings became shorter and less contentious. People actually started volunteering for committees again. In March, I got an unexpected package in the mail. It was from Brazil, from Helena, the artisan who'd made my hammock. Jennifer had apparently tracked her down and sent her a copy of the magazine article. Inside the package was a letter, translated into English, and a small hand-woven wall hanging in the same blue and purple colors as the hammock. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Davis, thank you for honoring my work by fighting for it. A craftsperson's greatest pride is knowing their creation brings joy and peace. Your hammock was made with love, and I am happy it found a good home. The enclosed wall hanging is a gift. May your home always be a place of rest and happiness. With gratitude, Helena." I hung the wall hanging in my living room, right where I could see it every day. Spring arrived, bringing perfect Arizona weather. The desert bloomed and my backyard filled with color. I'd started dating someone, a woman named Nicole Lambert, who I'd met through mutual friends at Tom's barbecue. She loved the hammock, and we'd spend evenings swaying gently, talking about nothing and everything. One Sunday morning in April, I was having my usual coffee in the hammock when Tom came through the side gate. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "What?" "The HOA is giving you an award." I nearly spilled my coffee. "A what?" "Robert wants to give you some kind of community service award at the next meeting for improving the neighborhood and helping uncover the financial mismanagement. I'm not making this up." I started laughing. "That's insane." "I know, but he's serious. He wants to make it a whole thing. Fresh start for the community and all that." I thought about it. It seemed ridiculous but also kind of touching. "Okay, I'll accept their weird award." The ceremony, such as it was, happened at the May HOA meeting. It was mercifully brief. Robert gave a short speech about the importance of homeowners advocating for themselves and how my actions had led to positive changes in the community. He presented me with a plaque that read, "Davis Vincent, in recognition of outstanding community service and commitment to homeowner rights, Saguaro Heights HOA." There was applause, and then we moved on to discussing pool hours for the summer. Afterward, Teresa Young approached me. She was carrying a folder. "I wanted to show you something," she said, opening it. Inside were before and after spreadsheets of the HOA finances. "We've recovered most of the money Sharon took. The insurance covered a big chunk, and Sharon's repayment plan covers the rest. But more importantly, look at this." She pointed to a line item labeled legal fees and compliance actions. Under Sharon, we were spending an average of $15,000 a year on lawyers and fining actions. So far this year, we've spent less than $1,000. People are happier and we're saving money, all because you wouldn't back down over a hammock. I didn't know what to say. "Thank you," Teresa said simply. Summer came. The magazine article continued to generate occasional interest. I received emails every few weeks from people around the country dealing with their own HOA nightmares, asking for advice. I answered what I could, usually suggesting they contact homeowner advocacy groups or real estate attorneys like Derek. The hammock became weathered in the way good outdoor equipment does. The colors faded slightly and the fabric softened. It became even more comfortable. I replaced the suspension straps once when I noticed some wear, but otherwise, it required no maintenance. Nicole moved in with me in August, a year after the whole situation had started. We hung a second hammock on the other side of the backyard, a smaller one that I ordered from a different artisan Helena had recommended. Now we could both swing gently in the desert evening, Cooper lying between the two hammocks, and just exist peacefully in our own space. In September, Outdoor Living magazine published their anniversary issue, looking back at popular features from the past year. The hammock story was included in their most impactful stories section, with an update about Sharon's conviction and the HOA reforms that had followed. I finally felt ready to put it all behind me. The hammock was just a hammock again, not a symbol or a battleground. It was a place to read on weekend mornings, to nap on lazy afternoons, to lie with Nicole and count stars on clear nights. October brought cooler weather and the end of the brutal Arizona summer. Tom and his wife hosted a neighborhood block party, something that would have been unthinkable under Sharon's regime. People brought dishes to share, kids ran around playing, and there was a general sense of community that had been missing before. Robert made a toast to good neighbors and reasonable rules. Everyone drank to that. In November, I received a final piece of closure. The court ordered Sharon to write formal letters of apology to all the homeowners she'd stolen from and all the homeowners she'd fined excessively. Mine arrived on a Tuesday. It was brief and obviously written under legal instruction. I apologize for my actions regarding the hammock dispute and for my mismanagement of HOA funds. I take full responsibility for the harm I caused. It was signed in what looked like a reluctant scrawl. I read it once, then filed it away in a drawer I rarely opened. She wasn't part of my life anymore, and I didn't want to give her any more mental space than necessary. Christmas lights went up again. This year, half the neighborhood decorated elaborately, no longer worried about violating some unwritten aesthetic guideline. The community looked cheerful and alive. On New Year's Eve, Nicole and I lay in the hammock together, wrapped in blankets against the cool night air. Fireworks popped in the distance and Cooper barked half-heartedly at the noise. "You know what's funny?" Nicole said. "What?" "A year ago you were in the middle of a war with your HOA. Now look at this place. It's completely different, all over a hammock." "All over standing up for yourself," she corrected. "There's a difference." The clock struck midnight somewhere. We could hear cheering from neighboring houses. "Happy New Year," I said. "Happy New Year," Nicole replied. The hammock swayed gently in the desert breeze, right where it belonged. Inside my house, the plaque from the HOA sat on a shelf next to the magazine cover featuring the hammock. The wall hanging from Helena hung in a place of honor. I thought about everything that had happened. The absurd confrontation with Sharon, the stress of the board meeting, the unexpected media attention, the arrest and trial, the reforms and positive changes. All of it stemming from one simple decision, to not back down when I knew I was right. Derek had been correct at that cafe months ago. Sometimes all it takes is one person saying enough is enough. One person refusing to accept arbitrary authority and demanding reasonable treatment. The consequences can ripple out in ways you never expect. My phone buzzed with New Year's messages from friends and family. My mom sent a photo of the magazine cover, still displayed on her coffee table. Derek sent a gif of fireworks. Tom texted from 3 houses away. "Another year in paradise, thanks to you, buddy." I smiled and put the phone away. The stars were incredibly clear tonight, sharp points of light in the vast Arizona sky. Cooper had calmed down and was snoring softly on the patio. Nicole's breathing had evened out into the rhythm of approaching sleep. In the distance, one last round of fireworks exploded in cascades of color. The hammock swayed, and I felt completely at peace. This was my home. This was my space. And a simple piece of woven fabric from Brazil, created with love and skill by an artisan I'd never met in person, had helped me claim that space and improve an entire community in the process. The fight had been exhausting and frustrating, but it had been worth it. Not just for me, but for every neighbor who now felt free to enjoy their property without fear of petty retaliation. For every homeowner who would benefit from clearer, more reasonable rules. For everyone who'd been quietly suffering under Sharon's authoritarian regime and could now breathe easier. As I drifted toward sleep, gently rocking in my award-winning hammock under the stars, I thought about how strange life could be. How a simple desire for a peaceful place to relax had turned into a catalyst for meaningful change. How standing firm on principle could lead to unexpected victories. The hammock creaked softly, a comforting sound now intimately familiar. Tomorrow I'd wake up, make coffee, and probably spend the morning right here, reading a book and watching the sun climb over the mountains. No one would find me for it. No one would measure it or document it or declare it non-compliant. It was just a hammock. Just a beautiful, perfectly crafted piece of functional art that happened to change everything. And it was mine, hanging peacefully in my backyard where it had always belonged, where it would remain for years to come, a quiet monument to the importance of standing your ground when you know you're right. The new year had arrived. Saguaro Heights was a better place. Sharon was facing the consequences of her actions. And I was exactly where I wanted to be, in a hammock under the Arizona sky, surrounded by good neighbors and the promise of peaceful days ahead. It was, I thought as sleep finally claimed me, a pretty good ending to what had been a very strange year. The hammock swayed on into the night, keeping its own gentle rhythm, and everything was exactly as it should be.